Hello, class. We are cheesing the Japanese flight 516. This presentation was conducted by, I don't know if I'm saying your name correctly, Josu,
Hopefully,
Logan,
hopefully.
Carter, and Liam, myself. To begin this slideshow, we're going to start with talking about, and then who had
All
this one?
right, sweet. So, Japan Airline Flight 516, here's pretty much the small summary of what happened. So, on January 2nd, Japan Airlines Flight 1516 was operated on an Airbus A350-900 from New Chitose Airport to Tokyo Haneda. And as they were landing in Tokyo Haneda on runway 34 right, they collided with the Japan Coast Guard, the Havilland, um, that was not supposed to be on the runway. So we know that there was 379 passengers and crew on board on the A350, and only one of the six crew on the Japan Coast Guard survived. And as soon as they struck, the Airbus slid over the runway by 1,700 meters, I think. You can go ahead and go on to the next slide. So here are the facts. So we know, as I've mentioned, 379 passengers, and only one passenger or the pilot survived on the tail land. That makes 380 survivors. Um, we know the Japan airline, the Airbus was clear to land. They verbally said that they're clear to land on runway 34 right. However, the Japan Coast Guard was not clear to enter the runway. They were told to hold short Charlie 5, and they repeated that they were going to hold short Charlie 5. So they acknowledged that. But we know that the start bar lights from Charlie 1 to 14 were unserviceable due to construction work. There was a NOTAM for this, so they should have checked that those holding short lights were unserviceable. So here's the course of events, how pretty much this happened. So as the A350 was coming into landing, Japan Coast Guard was told to hold short Charlie 5, which they were waiting for the A350 to land, and then they were going to give clearance to take off. Um, but they decided to enter the active runway while the A350 was already clear to land. Keep in mind, this was during nighttime, so it's less, um, you can't see airplanes at night unless you're guided by their lighting. And the thing with the Havilland is that it's a very old aircraft and their lighting isn't as bright as the new LEDs. So that's a huge factor that contributed to this collision. Um, so they acknowledged they were going to hold short Charlie 5, but they entered the active runway. They were actually lined up like they were going to take off. Even though they acknowledged they were going to hold short and not enter the active runway. So as soon as the A350 was going to land, they collided with the Havilland that was on the active runway. Um, and that aircraft slid over the runway about 1,700 meters, and it was terrible what it left the aircraft. And the aftermath, after the collision, just passengers and crews started to deplane the plane as fast as possible. I mean, you got a huge accident, you got fire, you got smoke. It's very unhealthy. And people were freaking out. People were freaking out. One thing that to keep in mind is that the passenger announcement system was destroyed. So there's no way to communicate with all the people unless there's someone screaming. In this case, they had megaphones to guide the passengers throughout the exit. And when we board a plane, you always got the safety protocols, and passengers actually listened. They didn't do anything that they weren't supposed to do. All they did was get out the plane and pretty much get out the area. Um, and yeah, pretty much on the other hand, the captain for the Japan Coast Guard was the only survivor from the other aircraft. So here's pretty much the outcome. As you can see on the top right, that's all that's left on the A350. It just burnt down. So total, we got 380 survivors. There was only five fatalities. I mean, RIP to those, but it could have been worse. Could have been a lot worse. We know that this is a first Airbus A350 crash. Another A350 has never crashed besides this one. This one's the first one. And we know that it's made of carbon fiber reinforced plastic. So that pretty much just enhances the performance of the plane. It's so fuel efficient, it makes it light but strong. However, one factor of using carbon fiber reinforced plastic is that it degrades really fast with high heat compared to other materials. So the fact that they got 379 passengers and crew off the plane with a material that is supposed to degrade even faster than normal material is pretty insane, if you ask me. And the last portion of the outcome, it's human error, really is the communication between the Japan Coast Guard and ATC wasn't as clear because they acknowledged they were going to hold short Charlie 5, not enter the active runway. But as we know, those stop hold short lines lights were the service. There's there wasn't a way to tell that they were holding short. Somehow they still entered the active runway. Um, yeah.
All right, so now we'll dive into basically the errors that occurred, deeper into those errors. So slice one of the Swiss cheese. The Japan Coast Guard Dash 8 aircraft, or can you go back one? It was in a hurry to deliver hurricane relief supplies. And so, being in a hurry, errors can occur. The runway, as we discussed, the runway stop bar light was not serviceable. It was under construction due to the old stop bar control system. So the Slice 3, Tower East informed the Dash 8 they were number one for takeoff and to proceed to holding point C5. So this gave the pilots the impression that they could enter the runway through Charlie 5. So that was operator error. And then Tower East failed to recognize that Dash 8 had entered the runway. And so there's multiple errors that occurred and holes that happened. We can go to the active failures next. So an active failure was misunderstanding from air traffic controller, leading to operator error of the pilots on the Dash 8 aircraft. They thought they could enter the runway, but even though they talked about that they would hold short, it just crossed their mind, and that's where it goes into expectation bias. They had in their mind that they could enter, even though they replied back the right call sign. They expected they could enter the runway due to air traffic controllers saying they're number one, implying that because they're flying hurricane relief supplies, they get priority. And the air traffic control not recognizing the runway incursion had taken place. And then, as we earlier discussed, the runway stop bar light not functioning. And so now we'll get into latent conditions. So the blinding runway lights, you're flying in from an aircraft onto a runway at night when they're just piercing bright lights. You're not going to see aircraft on the runway. And so that's something the A350 couldn't really control. And then the hurricane relief supply delivery, they were in a hurry to deliver these supplies to I'm probably going to butcher this name, but Niagara, Japan, following the New Year's Day earthquake there. And then distracted air traffic controllers. They're going through a lot at the time. I mean, they're keeping track of 5 other aircraft in the air along with 2 on the taxiway. And so although they should notice that runway incursions happen, I mean, due to our human error, we can't keep track of everything at once. So now we'll get into the defenses and barriers. So air traffic procedures. So there's not really much you can do about fixing the air traffic control system or the error that happened based off they're already keeping track of so many aircraft at once. So either more training or additional personnel tracking all aircraft and ground traffic. And then as for the non-functioning runway equipment, as in the stop bar lights, they should have some procedure in place, whether to, notify air traffic or have other options to produce some sort of stoplight while one is um, under maintenance, or having a quick fix type of system where if a system is going to be down for a while, either it could be from waiting on parts or other various aspects, have some sort of procedure in place to quickly fix defective equipment. And then human errors, that was the biggest portion of this accident, was so some extended training to prevent communication errors. Complacency was a big issue with this one. They had it in their head that, oh, we're number one, we can enter the runway, even though that wasn't the case. So another thing I want to point out is the aircrafts on the Dash 8, or the pilots, they mentioned that they wanted to get the flight crew back home that night. And so having that hurry in their head to get back home does cause errors to happen. And so in this case, it became fatal for them.
All right, and now we're leading into the section where we ourselves are the cheese. So we'll be going over the four main defense barriers that failed this night for this accident, which includes ATC communication. We've already talked about the runway lighting and the stop bar, situational awareness of the pilot and both crews, and the evacuation crew and the crew overall training. So I'll start it off with ATC procedures. So as Tokyo Tower, we cleared JAL 516 to land. To start with, they were on approach, so we told them to continue approach, and then we had no reason to see that they shouldn't be cleared to land, so we gave them the clearance. The Coast Guard Dash 8 was cleared to taxi to the holding point Charlie 5 for runway 34 right. We did not clear them to enter the runway, which is what they inadvertently did. Something that's important to note during the time of this accident is that air traffic control was talking to a few other aircraft at the time, and from what it looks like with the ATC transcript, either they didn't see or just didn't send an advisory out for the Dash 8 that was there on the runway. Something similar could be said about the crew for JAL, but that'd be in another section outside of ATC procedures itself. So, in a way, the clearances were correct. The compliances with the clearance did not seem correct for the situation, and it seems like ATC didn't back up their clearances by looking out the tower and seeing the Dash 8 on the runway. I can go to the next one. Let's take this one.
I got this. So, hi, I'm the stop bar that was supposed to stop aircraft from entering the runway. I'm the last line of defense from aircraft entering. I'm lit up when I'm working, but in this night on January 1st, I was not working. Or I believe it was January 2nd. I was not working. I was unserviceable. I was old equipment and I was getting worked on, but there should have been procedures in place to prevent aircraft from crossing my line. Well, these procedures could be extra eyes on these areas from air traffic control to prevent pilots from crossing me, or pilots being notified about my existence not working. And so these two conditions could have helped prevent this accident from happening.
All right, so I will reenact or act like both the pilots on the A350 and the de Havilland. So I'll start with the A350. So we're coming in, we're finally arriving to Tokyo Haneda. We're descending down to the runway. It's nighttime. There's a lot of lights on the runway. I think we're clear to land. I mean, towers cleared us to land. We should trust them. Let's get down on the ground. So let's get home. We're passing down the runway. We're almost touching down, and wow, we crash into an aircraft. We're sliding out the runway. There's lots of fire. And our TCAS, we have TCAS in our A350. Why didn't that help us? I mean, shoot, it always tells us like, hey, turn this way, turn that way. You're gonna collide. In this case, it didn't because, we're it's not ground based, it's only air based. And then now I'm act as the Japan Coast Guard pilots. We're priorities. We're just gonna go deliver supplies. There was an earthquake. There's people in help. I think it's nighttime. There's not much traffic. I think we got priority. I mean, they told us to hold short Charlie 5, but there isn't any lights, so we're just gonna enter the runway. Hopefully, we just get on out of here and it's over.
Evacuation procedures and overall crew training. Evacuation procedures, the flight crew did the best that they could with the equipment that they had available. As previously stated, the intercom system failed, it was destroyed. So the crew utilized their training and reacted quickly, adapting to the environment, which allowed for the successful evacuation of all of the occupants on Flight 516. The crew and passengers escaped through 3 of the 8 escape doors, using 2 of the front exits and 1 of the rear exit. Overall crew training, there could have just been some more situational awareness going on. Some things that we learned. The Japanese Transportation Safety Board gave recommendations after this incident. Stop bar maintenance procedures were reviewed. Further emphasis on runway incursion awareness, as well as training for pilots and air traffic controllers, was reviewed, and improvement on emergency equipment and more frequent testing. Some key takeaway slices. We've seen how many of these cheese layers have failed all at the same time between ATC not noticing the Dash 8 getting onto the runway, and also the 516 not seeing the plane go onto the runway, even though it's very difficult to see at night. This shows the importance of redundancy in aviation, so verifying, like if ATC gave them this order, then they should probably look out and verify that the Dash 8's following instructions as required. Keeping positive situational awareness. If the Dash 8 was aware of how close the plane was to landing, then they might not have proceeded to taxi onto the runway. And to continue to work as a team for overall success and safety. If just one person was able to catch one of the slips there, this could have prevented the accident completely. Here is a slide of our references. We use the Aviation Safety Network, Aircraft Accident Investigation Report, Channel News in Asia, and Psychotrix. Thank you everyone for listening. If you have any questions, feel free to reply to this post, obviously, because we're not in in-person presentation. And we'll be sure to respond with what we can figure out.